Catherine Elizabeth Hudson was born on October 25, 1984, in Santa Barbara, California. She is the second child of Maurice Hudson and Christine Perry, two Pentecostal pastors who, after a wild youth, decided to devote themselves to Christianity. The couple traveled across the United States preaching the Word of God until they finally returned to Santa Barbara and settled down. The household is strictly governed by religion, which means rules like not being allowed to eat Lucky Charms because they believe lucky comes from Lucifer. The only movie allowed is Sister Act 2, and the only music played is gospel. The strictest rule is that her parents decide who she can talk to, and that makes Katy feel lonely. Additionally, from the age of 3 to 11, the family moves constantly to preach. That lack of stability prevents Katy from forming friendships and growing up with the security that every child needs. And to make things even more complicated, the family goes through financial problems. When Katy is 11 years old, the family returns to Santa Barbara to settle down. And as part of this, her parents enroll Katy and her siblings in Christian schools, but also in singing lessons. There, Katy turns out to be so good that she joins the church choir. In singing lessons, Katy's friends start lending her records by popular artists so she can listen to them in secret at home. That's how she discovers a 1990s icon named Alanis Morissette. And with her, everything changes. Her lyrics inspire her and awaken in Katy the desire to write songs, so she begins to focus on improving her singing. For now, it's only at church, but this allows her to develop the confidence to perform in front of an audience. Things get better when at 13, she receives a guitar as a birthday present. From then on, she starts writing, composing, and performing her own songs at church. The irony is that at the same time, she begins to distance herself from that religious environment because deep down she feels she doesn't quite fit in, since it was something she never chose. Instead, she leans toward the typical life of a young Californian in the 2000s, learning to surf and skateboard. However, her priority remains music, since by this point the idea of making a living from her songs has started to take shape in her mind. For this reason, when she is 15, Katy takes a general knowledge exam to finish high school early and focus on her dream. She doesn't know it yet, but this is the best decision she will ever make in her life. To continue developing her voice, Katy enrolls in the Music Academy of the West in Santa Barbara. She soon catches the attention of Steve Jacobs and Jennifer Knapp, two Christian musicians who see great potential in her and take her to their studio in Tennessee so she can perfect her songwriting. As a result, Katy leaves her family behind to focus on her dream, and although what she wants most is freedom, she can't help but miss them a little. The reward comes when, thanks to Steve and Jennifer, she meets the executives of the Christian label Red Hill Records, who offer her a contract that she enthusiastically accepts, convinced that this is her big opportunity. At just 16 years old, Katy records her first album, simply titled Katy Hudson. It's a gospel album aimed at a young audience, and what's special is that all the songs are hers. The release is scheduled for March 2001, but the label is hiding a small detail: it's completely bankrupt. Red Hill Records declares bankruptcy before releasing Katy's album. So they leave the album without any promotion or advertising. Katy tries to promote it on her own and joins a tour with Christian singer Phil Joel, but it's not enough. The album barely sells about 200 copies, in other words, a total failure. Despite the hard blow that the failure of Katy Hudson meant, she's not ready to give up on her dream. Giving up would mean going back to her parents' house and the strict rules of the Pentecostal church. But she's not willing to do that because the time she spent away taught her there's a whole world to explore. Luckily, when she's 17, she lands an interview with the iconic Glenn Ballard, the producer who worked with Alanis Morissette on the song You Oughta Know, Katy's favorite song. When Glenn hears her sing and play the guitar, he knows there's something there, so he offers her a contract with his label, Java Records. So Katy moves to Los Angeles to give it a second try. And this comes with news that leaves her parents in shock. She makes the decision to leave gospel music behind. Her parents don't take the news very well, but little by little they start to accept that their daughter simply doesn't think the same way they do. This is the first time Katy rebels and realizes that in a way her parents never allowed her to think for herself. Now that she has the chance to do so, Katy is going to take advantage of it. She is going to discover who she is as a person and as an artist. In Los Angeles, Katy works hard, writes songs to prepare for a second album, and in her spare time, she takes the opportunity to give small concerts in coffee shops, hotels, or anywhere she can. Additionally, thanks to Glenn, she manages to sing at several fashion shows and in clubs in Paris, Tokyo, and Hong Kong, where she is well received by the audience. At this point, she decides to change her stage name, since Katy Hudson sounds very similar to Kate Hudson, the Hollywood actress. That's why she chooses the pseudonym Catherine Perry, which is her mother's maiden name. Although the experience teaches her a lot, when Katy returns to the United States, she is faced with reality. She hasn't made any money, and her financial situation is complicated. To get by, she buys and sells secondhand clothes while continuing to sing in small clubs. At one of these venues, the Hotel Cafe, a manager discovers her and offers to represent her, although his efforts don't yield great results. The situation gets worse when the record label delays payments, and to make matters worse, history repeats itself. Java Records is also in crisis and announces its bankruptcy just before releasing Katy's album. This time it's even worse because the album doesn't even see the light of day and the entire project ends up being cancelled. Some of the songs from this album have been leaked since then, giving us a glimpse of the kind of music Katy was trying to make. For example, the song It's Okay to Believe has a pop rock sound with deep lyrics, and so you don't have to look for it. Here's a snippet. It's okay to believe in something. It's alright to live your life for someone. There's another song called Box, where the rock influences are even more prominent. Overall, this scrapped album has a much more rock-oriented sound than what we associate with Katy Perry today. After the disaster with the record label, Katy doesn't know what to do, but Glenn has unwavering faith in her talent, so he helps her. He introduces her to an executive at Columbia Records, who after listening to her music is delighted and offers her a contract. This is already the third contract she's signed with a record label, but as the saying goes, third time's the charm, right? However, Columbia Records is having trouble finding an audience for Katy, so they come up with an idea. Katy Perry should form a band by joining one of the label's most important production groups. This group is called The Matrix. In the past, they had worked on the production of artists like Britney Spears, Mariah Carey, and Avril Lavigne, so it's no small thing that the label paired her with such an important group. From this idea, the band of the same name, The Matrix, was born, with Katy Perry as the lead vocalist alongside British singer Adam Longland. The problem is that Katy's artistic vision doesn't align with that of The Matrix. Although the band records a full album, creative differences lead to their breakup, and the record is shelved. Even so, Katy keeps moving forward, composing as a solo artist and working on a new album called Fingerprints, which is ready by mid-2006. The label plans to release it in 2007, but as the date approaches, doubts begin to arise because they're not entirely sure her pop image is well established. And after some consideration, at the end of 2006, they make two tough decisions: to shelve the album and to fire Katy Perry. This is the girl's fourth failed project, which leaves her in serious financial trouble. So much so that Katy is forced to borrow money from her younger brother, who is only 16 years old and doesn't even have money for himself. Even so, she finds a way to stay afloat and tries again. She contacts and joins an independent label called Taxi Records, with which she produces and releases Simple. This single achieves moderate success and even appears in the movie The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, which is the first time many young women hear her voice. At this moment, someone key appears, Angela Cabb, an executive from her former label who believes in Katy's talent and feels it was unfair to drop her just as her album was about to be released. Angela takes her demos and sends them to Capitol Records, where they are delighted. Just 4 months after being dropped, Katy signs a new contract. At Capitol, she starts working immediately, reimagining some songs from Fingerprints. She spends more than a year building her image and the concept for her album, which she calls One of the Boys, inspired by her tomboy phase when she was younger. A phase she says she adopted to rebel against her parents. Although they already have the name, they still need songs, and for that they rely on Dr. Luke, one of the most influential producers in the industry. When we think about an artist's music, we often forget all the work that goes on behind a song. Generally, we give credit only to the singer because they are the face of the project, but there is another key figure, the producer. Many times, it's thanks to him that the music gets its final sound, and in Katy Perry's case, that role was played by Dr. Luke. To understand his importance, it's enough to mention some of his work. He produced Since You've Been Gone by Kelly Clarkson and Girlfriend by Avril Lavigne. With his ingenuity in the studio, Dr. Luke gave late 2000s and early 2010s pop a fresh, catchy, and addictive sound capable of turning any track into an instant hit. It was the kind of music that dominated the radio because everyone wanted to listen to it. With his help, Katy recorded some of the most important tracks of her career and prepared an EP as her introduction. It includes several versions of her single, You're So Gay. It was released at the end of 2007 and finally received a good response from the public. Even Madonna on a radio show mentioned it as her favorite song at the moment and invited everyone to listen to this new artist named Katy Perry. The album is almost ready, but it still needs one key step: deciding which song will be its lead single. That's when she remembers a song she never recorded, but whose chorus she can't get out of her head. She shows this song to Dr. Luke, and he, delighted, tells her that this should be the lead single of her album. That's how the iconic song I Kissed a Girl was born. Now the concept of the song is, as its name suggests, something controversial for the time. Katy sings about an inexperienced girl who kisses another girl and, to her surprise, realizes she likes it. Although Katy is a heterosexual woman, when she distances herself from her church, she takes the opportunity to explore many things about herself, including her sexuality. This single is released in April 2008. Her parents don't like this concept at all, as they are convinced it promotes homosexuality, and to them, that's repugnant. But the rest of the world ends up falling in love with this song, and it catapults Katy to fame. At this point in her life and career, we could say that Katy finally made it, and she did so with a song and a style that contrasted with what anyone would expect from someone who grew up in a religious and conservative household. Looking back, what Katy did right here was to seek her own path to build an authentic life. In the end, we all grow up in places we didn't choose, and in those environments we're instilled with frameworks, expectations, behaviors, and beliefs. In Katy's case, it was this religion that dictated everything from what she could listen to how she should think. But the same thing can happen to anyone with other factors. The era you're born in, which defines what's considered acceptable, family demands that dictate what to study or how to live, or social pressures that determine how to dress, which jobs are respectable, or which dreams are worth pursuing. At first, we absorb all these worldviews from our environment, but sooner or later the moment comes when we have to decide what to do with them. Some people find meaning and well-being in what they've been given, and that's perfectly fine. But others, like Katy, feel they need something different and seek to forge their own path. In the end, I believe authenticity isn't about breaking away from everything you've received, but about consciously choosing what you truly identify with and leaving behind what you don't. And I think that's something worth highlighting and applauding, because it takes a lot of courage to do it. 2 months later, she releases her first studio album, One of the Boys. Over the following months, Katy focuses on promoting her album, so she takes part in the Warped Tour, a rock tour in the United States and Canada featuring various artists. When this tour ends, she embarks on her own tour called the Hello Katy Tour, which takes her across North America and Europe. Both the tour and the album end up becoming a success, and taking advantage of the fame she has achieved, in 2009, the record label decides to release the album she had recorded with The Matrix. Between these two tours, Katy meets someone who will become very important in her life, the actor Russell Brand. When they meet on the set of a movie, there's a spark between them, but they start dating later when they meet again at the MTV Awards. Meanwhile, Katy keeps working on her music, and at the end of July 2009, she does her first MTV Unplugged, which, if you're at all familiar with the music industry, you'll know is the mark of a star. Meanwhile, her relationship with Russell progresses quickly, and just a few months after they officially start dating, on December 31st, 2009, they get engaged during a trip to India. After the success of her debut, Katy doesn't want to become a one-hit wonder, so she works very hard to make sure her next album is even better than the first. To achieve this, Katy turns to her trusted producer, Dr. Luke, as well as her collaborator, Benny Blanco, and another industry giant, Max Martin. She comes to them with the mission of creating the perfect pop album. And boy, do they succeed. The first single is released in mid-2010. Her intention for this song is to evoke a feeling similar to living in the place where she grew up. And that's how California Girls is born. To complete her vision, she asks Snoop Dogg for help, who gives the song that special touch. Additionally, Katy says that another inspiration behind the song was another track about a city, the famous Empire State of Mind by Alicia Keys and Jay-Z. And the combination of all these factors ends up making California Girls a massive hit. A few months after the first single, Teenage Dream, is released, Katy Perry's second album, and with this she proves that she is truly a star in every sense of the word. After the success of the first single, Katy continued with the release of a series of songs that made history. Teenage Dream, followed by Firework, then E.T., after that Last Friday Night, and finally, The One That Got Away. All the singles from the album, except The One That Got Away, reached #1 on the Billboard charts in the United States, making her the first female artist to achieve this. Just to give you an idea, the only artist who had achieved this before was Michael Jackson. Teenage Dream was revolutionary for its time. Its mix of pop, techno, and disco ended up defining the sound of the 2010s, a style that we inevitably associate with Katy Perry because she was the one who brought it to the peak of popularity. But that sound didn't come out of nowhere. Behind it were producers like Dr. Luke, Benny Blanco, and Max Martin, who helped shape it by drawing inspiration from what was already resonating in the pop scene with artists like Britney Spears, Lady Gaga, and Rihanna. Because music, like any form of art, doesn't exist in a vacuum. It always responds to a context, to influences, and to a specific era. Katy and her team's innovation was to take those references and turn them into anthems that defined an entire generation. But it's important to remember that those kinds of hits, no matter how iconic they become, are also a reflection of a particular moment in culture. And what is born so closely tied to its time will sooner or later risk losing its strength when music and collective taste change direction, just as is about to happen to our protagonist. Amid all the success surrounding her during these months, Katy Perry marries Russell in October 2010. It's a charming moment, but what she doesn't know is that soon this man will be the cause of her greatest sadness. But that's still a ways off, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. After the success of her songs, Katy embarks on her second tour, which she calls the California Dreams Tour. This tour is even bigger and more elaborate than the previous one, and she even creates a visual story that unfolds throughout her concerts. With this tour, we see Katy's most extravagant side, something that will become a hallmark of her image. The story follows Katy in a world where there is no color and love is very hard to find. But thanks to a wish, she manages to leave that world and arrive in Candyfornia, the fictional place she introduced in California Girls, where everything is colorful. This is an example of what will characterize Katy's entire career, camp. You've probably never heard this term before, so here's a bit of context. Camp is a way of seeing and expressing the world through the artificial and the exaggerated. It's about embracing the theatrical, the extravagant, and the humorous, leaving behind the idea of what is natural or traditionally elegant. Camp uses irony and exaggeration to play with standards of beauty and style. That's why it's closely linked to LGBT culture, where the best examples abound. Think, for example, of a drag queen like RuPaul, someone who performs as a woman in an exaggerated way, with heavy makeup, huge wigs, and theatrical costumes. That staging isn't meant to be realistic, but rather striking, fun, and dramatic. That is camp. Later on, magazines like Rolling Stone gave Katy the title of Queen of Camp, a well-deserved recognition because this aesthetic runs through everything she does, from her songs and videos to her concerts. But going back to the tour, despite how well things are going for her and the commercial success of the album, Katy goes through a very difficult time in December 2011, when she receives a call that will change her life. Before going on stage for a concert, Katy receives a call from her husband, who, without beating around the bush, tells her he wants a divorce. Katy was not expecting this at all, and we can see this here as it was captured for her 2012 documentary, Part of Me. It's clear there that the news affects her deeply. But Katy has a show to put on, so she gathers all her strength and goes out to give her best, not knowing that this will be the last time she speaks to Russell. At first, Katy believes that the reason for their separation is their demanding work schedules, but Russell later admits that the real reason is Katy's rising fame and her activism for women's and LGBTQ rights, which he does not agree with. The divorce deeply affects Katy, who even comes to consider ending her own life. But fortunately, she seeks the help she needs, and thanks to therapy, she manages to climb out of that dark hole she was in. At the end of the year, Katy receives Billboard's Woman of the Year award, a great honor that, however, is overshadowed by her speech. When she takes the stage, she declares that she is not a feminist, although she believes in the strength of women and encourages the audience to believe in themselves to achieve whatever they want, using herself as an example. Although her words were well-intentioned, many criticize them for sounding more like a motivational mantra than a true reflection on the place of women in the world. After this, Katy spends quite some time working on her new album. At first, she wants to make it darker, still affected by her divorce, but after reflecting in therapy, she decides to take it in another direction. And that new direction becomes clear when she releases her first single, a song you've probably heard called Roar. It's an empowerment song about not letting yourself fall just because you stumble, and that even if you do fall, you can always get back up. This can be interpreted as her response to what happened with Russell, since she says that no matter what happens, she will always keep fighting for her happiness. The album comes out in October 2013, and although the reviews are mixed and only Roar and Dark Horse stand out, Katy isn't trying to surpass the success of Teenage Dream. This time she wants an honest album that helps her process her pain. The first song she writes is By the Grace of God, where she shows how hard it was to survive her divorce. In the song, she references the suicidal thoughts that tormented her during this time and how she managed to survive by the grace of God and her loved ones. In early February 2015, Katy Perry is the featured artist for the Super Bowl halftime show, and it becomes one of the highest points of her career. The show has Katy's signature extravagance with a giant lion and dancing sharks. It's an unforgettable spectacle with 118.5 million viewers. Oh, and by the way, it's also the most watched halftime show in history. Even though the year starts off well, a conflict soon arises that will end up sparking a legal battle and will ultimately cost someone their life. In 2015, the nuns of the Immaculate Heart of Mary decide to sell the convent where they had lived for decades. They sign an agreement with Dana Hollister, a restorer interested in taking care of it. But the archdiocese intervenes, claiming that she does not have the right to make the sale. According to the church, the decision was theirs and they had already chosen another buyer, Katy Perry, who wanted to acquire the convent to turn it into her residence. The nuns strongly oppose this. On one hand, they feel that with the sale, Katy will get nothing. On the other hand, they believe that her irreverent style goes against their values. For them, having the singer live there would be almost a sacrilege. The dispute ends up in court. The jury invalidates the sale made to Hollister, and Katy, together with the archdiocese, decides to sue the restorer. Thus begins a legal battle that will last for years, but we'll talk about that later. Back to music, Katy is working on her new album, but this time she chooses to do it without Dr. Luke, the producer who had been behind her biggest hits. She says she does it to explore new facets, but there's another reason. At the end of the previous year, the singer Kesha had sued him for sexual harassment and gender-based violence. As a result, the industry had turned against him, and many speculate that Katy probably prefers not to be associated with him. The problem is that when the case goes to court in 2016, Katy gets dragged into it. In leaked messages between Kesha and Lady Gaga, Kesha claims that Katy was also a victim of Luke and that her testimony could change everything. Katy strongly denies it. She testifies under oath that he never harmed her, and her word carries weight. Kesha's accusations are dismissed, leaving the singer in a devastating position. Despite it being a very difficult year due to the legal troubles she was involved in, at the beginning of 2016, Katy meets someone who will make her believe in love again, actor Orlando Bloom. The couple had met at a Golden Globes party, but it wasn't until May of that same year that they made their relationship official through Instagram. But not all relationships work out the first time, and 10 months after they start dating, the couple takes a break, although they remain friends. Meanwhile, Katy continues working on her next album, Witness, which she finally releases in June 2017. The first singles from this era are Chained to the Rhythm, Bon Appetit, and Swish Swish. The last single, Hey Hey Hey, is released at the beginning of 2018, along with a music video in which Katy Perry plays a woman from the French court of the 17th century who dreams of being free from the expectations placed on her simply for being a woman. Katy symbolizes this struggle through a costume. To reflect femininity, she dresses as Marie Antoinette, while to exemplify masculinity, she disguises herself as Joan of Arc. But the message is not as simple as it might seem at first. The point of the video is to show that a woman can be strong while also being gentle and feminine. These things are not mutually exclusive. She conveys this message not only through the video, but it is also reflected in the lyrics. In the song, she describes herself as a beautiful, big brain with a pretty face, making it clear that she can be both intelligent and beautiful. This is the first time Katy includes feminism in her music, but it won't be the last. By this point, Katy has been in a legal battle for years with the nuns of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and it seems the end is nowhere in sight. This case has caused a lot of stress for the sisters, but they still have to continue going to court to try to get their convent back, so they keep attending court hearings. In 2017, they received terrible news when the jury determines that the nuns do not have the authority to sell the convent, thus clearing the way for Katy to buy it. Additionally, the restaurateur is found guilty of malice and fraud, so she must pay a large sum of money to Katy and the archdiocese. This leaves her bankrupt, and in March 2018, the nuns Catherine Holtzman and Rita Callanan accompany her to bankruptcy court to support her. Sister Catherine speaks to Katy through the press. She says to her, "Katy, please stop. This does no good to anyone. It only hurts a lot of people." A few hours after saying these words, she collapses in the middle of a legal proceeding and dies. A few days later, Sister Rita, who was accompanying Dana on the day Catherine died, tells the press that Katy Perry has blood on her hands. Her death paints Katy in a terrible light. She comes across as a woman without compassion for not giving in at court, and they blame her for Sister Catherine's death, saying that her death was due to the stress she was under. This paints Katy as a terrible person, and the public doesn't forgive her as quickly as they might have before, especially because her music hasn't reached the same level of success as it did during the Teenage Dream era. Her last two albums sold well, but they didn't have the same impact on popular culture as the world she created with Teenage Dream. It seems that the public's opinion of her has been deteriorating with each album, with her role in the Kesha case and now because of the death of Sister Catherine. One last fact that could be the final nail in the coffin of her career. Returning to her love life for a moment, in mid-2018, she officially gets back together with Orlando Bloom, and it seems that this time things are going to work out. As for her career, Katy begins a new chapter when she announces that she will be a judge on American Idol. She will remain in this position for the following years, giving us some very funny moments on the show, such as when she dresses up as the Little Mermaid, but falls off her chair and the mermaid tail keeps her from getting up. Or also when she shows that she can imitate a frog with her neck. Katy continues working on her music and in 2019 releases 3 singles. But the most important thing comes a few months later. She finds out that she is going to be a mom. She and Orlando Bloom have been together for 3 years, and when he hears the news, he proposes to her. In March 2020, she officially announces her pregnancy in the music video for Never Worn White. Shortly after, the COVID pandemic breaks out, but Katy doesn't stop and confirms that her new album Smile will be released in August. 2 days before the release, her daughter Daisy Dove Bloom is born, and motherhood transforms her life. In Smile, she explores her emotions and acknowledges the depression she suffered after her breakup with Orlando in 2017. But now the couple is enjoying a great moment, and their daughter, even though the album receives mixed reviews and lower sales, Beyond the reception of her album, Katy focuses on being a mother and spends the rest of the year calmly. She kicks off 2021 with a bang by singing Firework at Joe Biden's presidential inauguration, and at the end of that same year, she begins one of the best phases of her career with a Las Vegas residency, an exclusive contract to perform in the city, just as artists like Elvis Presley or Britney Spears have done. Her camp aesthetic fits perfectly with the atmosphere, and her show receives excellent reviews. Billboard described it as part fantasy, part hallucination, and completely camp. Months later, she receives the keys to the city as a symbol of local affection, and her residency is extended until the end of 2023, marking the close of a great chapter in her career. The following year, Katy announces that she will leave her spot as a judge on American Idol to focus on her next album. Fans are excited for new music after 4 years since the last album, but they're not prepared for what's coming. In June 2024, Katy Perry releases Woman's World, the first single from her new album, and the reception is not what she expected. The song aims to criticize the patriarchy, but many see it as an empty message, especially since Katy worked again with Dr. Luke, a producer accused of abusing Keisha. For the public, the supposed feminism of the song feels more performative than real. They also criticize the lyrics, which are too simple and reduced to inspirational mantras, presenting feminism only as individual empowerment without acknowledging its systemic dimension. The reaction gets worse with the music video. Although Katy is known as the Queen of Camp, this time her aesthetic doesn't convince anyone. The video starts with her dressed as Rosie the Riveter at a construction site, but suddenly she is crushed by the Liberty Bell, is reborn as a bionic woman, and ends up breaking a pane of glass before rising in a helicopter, a metaphor for the glass ceiling. The concept, although tied to a real issue in feminism, comes across as confusing and even contradictory to many. In response to the wave of criticism, Katy explained that it was meant to be a satirical video, but the general opinion is that Woman's World is not among her best works. Despite this, the album, titled 143, is coming out in September, but the public's reception is not the best. One of the most common criticisms is that Katy is trying to recreate the success of Teenage Dream, especially since she worked with the same producer for this album. But it seems that this time it didn't quite work out. Something she may not have considered is that what was popular in 2008 isn't necessarily popular almost 20 years later. In any case, Katy focuses on promoting the album, so she embarks on a world tour with her first concert in Mexico City in April 2025. It was during her visit to the city that Katy's awkward moment on Mexican public transportation happened, as part of her appearance on the show Venga la Alegría. Who knows why they sent her to that show, but she gave this country a very funny moment. Less than a month after starting her tour, Katy is back in the headlines for traveling to space on Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin spacecraft, along with other influential women. The flight is promoted as the first all-women mission, although something similar had already happened in 1963. Blue Origin presents it as an act of empowerment, but many see it as a publicity stunt. This impression is reinforced when Katy declares that space will finally be glamorous, a comment that draws criticism for giving the sense that the priority was the image rather than the message. She responds by saying that even though the internet tries to turn her into a human piñata, she has nothing but love for her haters. Meanwhile, the tour goes on, but several fans feel that her shows lack energy and even seem boring. Some of her fans began to think it might be due to personal problems, and the rumors were confirmed when she announced that she and Orlando Bloom had separated. Currently, as of September 2025, Katy Perry is still on tour, and it seems she's giving love another chance, as she has been photographed with Justin Trudeau, the former Prime Minister of Canada. Without a doubt, Katy Perry is no longer what she once was. But if we look at her history, it seems that it wasn't scandals that marked her downfall. Many artists have gone through controversies just as bad or even worse and still maintain solid careers. What seems to have happened with Katy has more to do with the very nature of the industry that took her to the top. That same production system, designed to create instant hits, to be heard everywhere and win over millions, was ultimately what left her trapped. Her extravagant, colorful style and musical structures were perfect for her time. So perfect that they turned her into an icon, but it also became hard to sustain as the world's tastes changed. And as a result, that pop, which once seemed unstoppable, ended up being a contingent phenomenon tied to a specific time and context. Pop, like culture itself, never stands still. What was an anthem yesterday can feel distant tomorrow. The only thing that remains is change. But in that constant movement, what truly matters is the mark an artist leaves on people. And in that sense, Katy Perry is already part of the collective memory of an entire generation. A reminder of what, for many, was a good time. And memories, unlike hits, never expire.